Hello, my name is Gayatri Aij and I am an undergraduate student at the Department of Comparative Literature, Jadavpur University. I will be presenting my paper titled Women of Color How Bodies Represent Identity in Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. This paper looks at Bernardine Evaristo's portrayal of black women's identity in Girl, Woman, Other. Her interconnected stories of British black women whose lives are entirely different from one another in terms of their backgrounds, experiences, and choices raise questions about gender, sexuality, race, framing the bigger question of one's identity. There are multiple narratives in the novel, each shaped by the events in the lives of these women. Voices that talk about patriarchy, domestic violence, politics, and colorism as they come to understand throughout their life. Evaristo in this novel binds together women of color across generations, social classes, and faiths and portrays their unique and individual identities through their bodies. It can be argued that each identity is shaped by and reflected in the clothes and accessories that a woman chooses to wear, from how she ties up her hair to how she feels about her body. The women's bodies become representations of different identities. They embody motives. In Girl, Woman, Other, the details such as a sequined hijab, the hoop earrings, or the navy blue trousers paired up with a white shirt are all significant because they reflect the very politics of the relation between clothing and fashion and identity, social, cultural, and gender. The racial, gendered, and sexual identities of women are highly influenced by what society wants them to be, how it expects them to talk, how it tells them to dress and behave, how it distinguishes who a good woman is from a bad woman based on very basic and everyday characteristics. This paper focuses on identity shaped by clothing and fashion and how it is linked to the consciousness of the women in Evaristo's novel. When we look at the lives of the women in the text, there is a distinct pattern that shapes them. Each young girl is inspired by an independent woman. She wants to present herself in acceptable or appreciable ways. There is a constant pressure on young women to look beautiful in terms of what she puts on and what she confidently walks in, even if it is not the kind of clothing that she feels comfortable in. Kamla Das, in her confessional poem and introduction, speaks about the psyche of women from childhood as a lover, as a wife, a voice against exploitation, each role constituting different demands and a different perspective of the people around her. However, there are women who are confident in their wardrobe, who do not live by the society's rules or standards of beauty. The section on Amma in the first chapter is about a queer theatre director woman in Britain, and her daughter Yaz says that the mad old woman look displayed by Amma is also how the society describes women of color who choose to wear what expresses their personality. The natural hairdos of black women are considered to be inappropriate or funny by the racist society. Emma Dabiri in Don't Touch My Hair argues that the desire to conform to the European aesthetic, which values light skin and straight hair, is a result of a propaganda campaign that has lasted more than 500 years. It is the imposition of a system that denigrates anything that is perceived as too African. The mad old woman look is a stereotypical identification of women of color, which leads to a fear of ignominy and otherization, thus forcing these women to hide their true selves down to something as basic as their hair. No matter how confident and opinionated Yaz as a young woman is, she refuses to be spotted alongside her mother because of the way she dresses. To her daughter, Amma is not a normal mother because of what she wears. What defines normal here is perhaps how the white society defines how black women should be presenting themselves in the streets or in the society. For women like Amma, to wear chunky African bangles is a way to hold on to their cultural identity. When a woman of color specifically wears clothes and accessories that are not considered to be fit for a society that calls itself multicultural and yet is racist, She chooses to form her collective identity by reclaiming her ethnic pride. Ornaments play a significant role in cultural communities across the world. There are various bangles, anklets, bracelets, and earrings that are made of different materials such as copper, brass, gold, grass, or even beads, which have symbolic values and importance within various African communities. The different colors and materials of these ornaments and their connotations vary across communities. They can be symbols of love, of wealth and happiness, of sexuality and fertility, or even certain mechanisms of spiritual healing. There is a specific kind of Shona spirit medium, which is also known as the Patsemu, and it can be identified with certain kinds of bangles made of gold, copper, and brass, known as the Darira. It is important to note that these symbolic meanings not only differ across communities but may also vary when these are being received by British black women in various points of time in history. The significance of the chunky African bangles that Amma wears is that of an identity that she wants to hold on to, her individual identity of a black woman and that of a larger community, cultural, social, and perhaps even religious. In the second section called Yaz, we are introduced to a young woman named Waris, a Sudanese Muslim woman of color, and we look at what the hijab means to her. And I quote, Waris matches her headscarves with the color of her flowing clothes. She has green days, brown days, blue days, floral days, fluorescent days. She wears a hijab to make a statement about her Muslim identity. Unquote. Suad Abdul Khabir writes in her article Hujjabis and the Muslim Dandies how fashion intersects with race, gender, class, and Muslim identity about a particular headscarf style used by black Muslim women in the United States. I quote, a scarf tied in a bun at the back of a woman's head that is also tied up in the complexities of race and class in the United States. Unquote. For Waris, the politics behind wearing a hijab is that of exertion of her Muslim identity. She also refuses to call herself a traditionalist and does not wear black clothing or a black hijab. Waris challenges the stereotypes within the Muslim community and outside. The reason she wears the hijab is to confront the Islamophobic society that demonizes Muslims and how they perceive every Muslim person from the way of their clothing to label them as threatening or terrorizing. The third section of chapter 2 revolves around the life of Latisha Kanisha Jones. The oppression that young black teenage girls face is intensified because of the intersections of gender, race, and sexuality that further makes it a challenge for them to weave an identity that defines them as not only an ethnic or cultural community but also independent individual human beings. Latisha knows that her uniform makes her look smart, professional, and presentable in the society. Not having a clear understanding of the social constructs, young girls usually wear what they think is presentable and attractive. Like in the first section of the second chapter, Carol, a friend of Latisha's, feels about her sense in clothing and fashion. On the occasion of a party, Carol was extremely happy and relieved about the fact that Latisha had forced her to dress up. They also have some amount of purchasing power, which results in certain accessories not just reflecting Carol's or Latisha's sense in fashion, but also in certain ways their social and economic backgrounds. The role of a diva is a pre-existing role in the society which a large number of girls in their teenage years look up to and crave to be able to take up. Latisha now wears a uniform of navy blue trousers with a crease down the front, a navy blue cardigan, a fresh white shirt, and has her hair gelled down and side parted. Her uniform does not allow her to wear her natural hair, and she has internalized the fact that she looks professional and smart only when her hair is parted in a manner that does not come to her naturally. However different Carol's and Latisha's lives may have turned out to be, what is common about the two of them is how they have come to accept the established practices of capitalism in terms of how they dress for work. It is not just hair when it comes to black identities. The reason Latisha feels more presentable without her natural hair, or the reason Yas feels her natural hair would be problematic for the child sitting behind her in the classroom or the person sitting behind her in the audience, is because of the stares and the laughter that these women have experienced as young children. A news article published on the 18th of November 2019 talks about some cases of discrimination against women of color who wear their natural hair. Ruby Williams, an 18-year-old girl, was 14 years old when she was told by her school that her hair breached the policy of the Urswick School in East London, which stated Afro hair must be of reasonable size and length. The third chapter of the novel, with the section called Shirley, talks about a woman who belongs to the black community, and dressing and styling herself has a certain kind of communication of ideas of self-respect, cultural appreciation, and community pride. Shirley carries her pride with herself every day on the way to her workplace, the school where she teaches and considers herself responsible for educating young children. Shirley is keen on educating her students about the oppression of the blacks in the past, while she herself senses the bizarre looks from white people, especially white women, in the streets who clutch their purses or bags tighter when she is passing by them, or when she sits beside them in a public transport. Shirley faces this every single day. She notices all the negative reactions of white women when they look at her, are passing by, or sitting next to her, all because of the color of her skin is black. This reminds one of Henry Louis Vivien's Derosio's Freedom to the Slave, where the speaker makes an important note that slavery or oppression is not just a physical state when one enslaves a person, but there can be slavery of thoughts and beliefs, which is also as detrimental as subjugation of a man's or woman's physical being. Further, clothing and fashion has played a major role in shaping and reflecting the individual identities and the lives of Morgan, or Megan as she used to be called before. In the fourth chapter, Megan describes how her mother unknowingly repeats patterns of gender oppression on her. The adults in Megan's life, who are part of the conservative generation, attempt to fit Megan into the society's gender norms. Megan's preference of wearing trousers instead of dresses as a young child was not acceptable in her family and was thought to be an inversion of gender roles. Megan one day hears her mother tell her auntie that she is such a beautiful child, but there is not a feminine bone in her body, coming to believe that these tendencies are a nurtured trait. When on her 18th birthday she returned home from the tattoo studio with her first full sleeve of raw tattoos, she was mistreated by her parents, and the very act of getting inked on her body was absolutely unacceptable in her family. Megan's parents were not ready to accept her identity, an identity that she herself was not very certain of, an identity that she was trying to create and recreate as her teenage years went by. She could understand herself. Her mother believed that Megan was no longer a normal person when she decided to get tattoos inked on her body. To Megan, the tattoos she got inked on her arm were a way of asserting that she had every right to reflect her identity through what she chose to wear on her body. During the time, Megan, who now identifies as Morgan, felt alienated, believed to have inhabited a world of his family neither understood nor into which they could follow, Bibi came into Morgan's life. Bibi was an online chat room friend of Morgan's who explained what the terms transgender and transsexual mean. Bibi understands what it means to dress up and apply makeup as a woman. When it comes to a thick layer of face paint on a black woman, it is also about how a woman of color is forced to wear makeup products that make her skin look lighter. There is a preference for lighter skin within the British society. There is discrimination based on skin color, colorism, which leads to a very large number of women, especially those in their teens, hating their bodies, the color of their skin. Shirley Ann Tate, in her essay titled Skin Lightening, Contempt, Hatred, Fear, explains what value lighter skin has across the globe, cultural, symbolic, and economic. She states, and I quote, "Skin is the biggest organ, a container for who and what we are and can become." Unquote. Morgan, 6 years later, is no longer Megan and self-identifies as gender-free. Each woman in Evaristo's Girl, Woman, Other has her own choice of dressing, and each of them present or represent a certain set of common concerns or dialogues of the black community. There are various body image issues associated with the consciousness of women of color, radical microaggressions or ignorance, hypersexualization, sacrifice or unacceptability of natural hair, and the validation and invalidation given by others. Clothing and fashion in many ways also filter between our private and public lives. Performance of identity for black women involves a certain kind of balance between what their private or cultural identity is and what would be best suited for their public or social identity, which leaves a huge impression on their work life. Thank you.